Welcome back to Boiler Wild. My name is Eric Johnson. I know it's been too long since the last episode. I know y'all have been just waiting anxiously for this next episode because I live in my own little world and I realize that everybody just waits for this wonderful podcast to come out and checks every morning. I have been dropping the ball. This is episode 40. If you already don't know, my name is Eric Johnson, and I started this podcast to help you learn stuff, to talk through problems I'm thinking about, to talk through topics, to bring on people in the industry, in the boiler industry or other industries that I think will find helpful to listen to. And I have just been busy, but that's not an excuse. I started this podcast so that I could do all the things that I just mentioned. And it is a privilege to have a podcast. It's something I get to do. Keyword get. It's not something I have to do. Once I view this podcast as a chore, as something I have to do, I'll probably just stop it. But I get to do a podcast, and over the last couple of weeks, I've been thinking about a lot of what is the point of training? Can we even train people? Is training even worth it? What is the point with AI? It seems like all the money we are spending, billions of dollars, it seems like, for companies to try to figure out how to remove humans from every part of the world on the business side of like making money, making products. And you start going down this hole, and it gets to be this very depressing thing. And everybody says, "Oh, the blue collar, nobody's, we can't be replaced, or we're not going to be replaced in a bit," and all this stuff. And while I agree with that, and while I agree AI right now is very overhyped, you just can't ignore the continuous march towards we need to figure out how to replace humans because humans are imperfect and humans are messy and humans are hard to manage. And that, going back to training, it's hard to teach humans stuff, especially when they don't want to learn it. And I will say, the inspiration of people is one of the hardest things. So most companies have the unrealistic expectation that if somebody is in a job, that they want to get better and that they want to earn more money and get more responsibility. And that is not true. And that especially comes from people at the top of the corporate management. A lot of people, including me, think, well, why doesn't everybody just want to get better and learn more and earn more money and get more responsibility? But that's not true with everybody. Some people just want to be able to afford rent or buy a home and to make enough money to have beer and watch football on the weekends. And they're content with that. They don't want to take work home with them. They don't want to do stuff after hours outside of their typical job to make themselves better. And that's, I would say, more of the population than less. And that's not even just in work, that's in life. Most people live the same life 6 months over again and again and again until they die without making any real vast improvements. It's so easy to fall into the trap, especially nowadays. It's never been easier in 2025 to be distracted. You get home from work, maybe you have a family, you sit down, you have dinner, and that's not even common these days to have dinner together with a family. And, you turn on Netflix and you watch TV for 3 hours, you scroll on your phone, and you go to bed. And then on the weekends, you're running your kids around to sports practices, you're watching sports, you're doing yard work, whatever you have to do. And Sunday night rolls around and you're like, oh man, I got to go back to work tomorrow. And then you repeat that whole thing week over week, month over month, year over year. And all of a sudden 10 years goes by. You're like, where's the time gone? If you don't actively change your day, you can't expect a year to have a different outcome. Like if I have the same routine every single day for a year, I will get whatever I'm working towards or not working towards with that routine. If my routine is wake up and just eat all day, I'm going to get fat. But if my routine is wake up, eat healthy, go to the gym, go for walks, work out, I'm probably going to lose weight and get fit. But with training, and I've been really wrestling with ideas. So there's one fact of, or there's one like part of my thinking and one part of kind of the thinking of right now, especially with the internet, is everything can be explained. There's an expert for everything. And if you're not an expert, you can't talk about it. And I think that's maybe true, but also I would say the most experts, one, what makes you an expert? And that's really just, well, I know more than the average person. But just because you're an expert doesn't mean you're 100% right with everything you say. And I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast a couple days ago. This one was a couple months old, but he said something along the lines of, you have to be willing to sit and think and talk through ideas that you're uncomfortable with. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. They think the world has to be a certain way, and they don't know something. And one, it's okay not to know, but you have to almost wrestle with ideas and thinking. And so where I'm going with this is so common in the blue collar trades, HVAC, electrician, boilers. Companies are continuously searching for people who have it. And what is it? It can be defined as they have common sense, or they have the innate ability to see things how the average person thinks they should be done. And I had a conversation with somebody a couple of days ago about what is common sense and can it be taught? And I'm sure we can define common sense. And I looked up common sense and what it means, and it really just comes down to what the average person knows. But if we go with the premise of what is common sense and can it be taught? So if I don't know if I'm right or wrong with this, but I'm wrestling with this idea. So if we say common sense cannot be taught, that would mean we have to be extremely selective with who we choose to train in a specific skill. In this case, boilers, could be HVAC, electrician, but this is also outside of the blue collar industry. I would say common sense is also common sense is something that can be applied to every area of your life, no matter what you do. But it's seen so often, I believe, with blue collar, because a lot of the times you are out working on equipment, fixing problems that you really don't have the answer to, and you just kind of have to figure it out. Everything works, though, in the bounds of science. Like if you light a torch and put it against metal, that metal is going to get hot unless there's water on the other side of that metal pulling the heat away. And now the metal is only going to warm up slightly, but the water's pulling the heat away and it's not going to get red hot. So is that common sense or is that just learned education? And so if we say we are searching for the people with the it factor and they need to have common sense and it can't be taught, that would mean we need to be able to measure common sense. So how do you measure common sense? So I looked it up and there were some tests online, and whenever there's a test, you really have to look at the root of the test and say, what does this actually measure? And just because you say the test actually measures something doesn't actually mean that it means that. That makes sense. So I took one of the common sense tests and I got like a 78 score, which was above average, above the to the right-hand side of the bell curve. And I would say I have a pretty good sense of common sense. I have the it factor, and that's maybe what allows me to be more successful as a service technician or as somebody who goes out and can see really how things should work without like actually knowing how they work. Like I don't really know how an engine works, but I can figure it out and deduct from like what I'm seeing. Like I have a general idea, but I don't know the math behind it. I don't know any physics. And it's like, well, this turns, the gas gets injected in here, it's sprayed, ignited, the piston goes down. This turns, the output is then turned into the transmission puts it into the wheels. Like I have a general understanding of it, but I wouldn't say I'm a expert of it to where I could teach people about it or that I've like specifically learned about it. So if we go on the other side of this, if common sense can be taught, that means we would have to define common sense once again. And we could teach anybody anything. And while I believe a lot of common sense is just mistaken for education, I do think humans have strengths and weaknesses. But like, let's apply this to some other area that's a little bit maybe easier to see or think about is like in every business, you hopefully have leaders. So can you make a leader, or are people born leaders or born with traits and qualities that make them better for leadership or sales? Is somebody born a salesperson, as in they have the qualities and traits that makes a good salesperson, or can we teach good salespeople? And I would say, like, for sales, there's some natural people that's, extrovert, caring, curious. Those are traits that would make a good salesperson. However, that would mean that we could not teach somebody else sales that didn't have those traits, and that's simply not true. With enough training and enough reps and enough educational experience around them, I think you could teach, as long as they have basic human skills, I think you can teach anybody sales and the art of it and how to handle objections, and they can get very good at it. So going back to training and common sense, companies are looking for this it factor, for somebody who's got it. And I don't know if common sense has, if the it factor is greater than common sense, or like they have the ability to see the world in a different way. And I was reading this other thing the other day too as well, of women typically think a certain way. I forget. I don't want to remember wrong. But then men typically have an innate task or ability in order to see an object from all perspectives. So when you look at a car from the front, you aren't looking at it from the back, but you can from your experiences, from your mental deduction of what you're seeing, you can estimate what the rear of the car looks like. Same thing with anything. If you were to, let's bring it back to boilers. If you were to look in a boiler room and you're looking at the boiler, the piping, the insulation, the burner, the wiring, you see piping, but then okay, like piping, I have water going through that. What is the water doing? I have steam going through this piping. What is the steam doing? Steam is a gas. I have this boiler. And you start building this like mental model and ability to think in 3D. And I would say like I can do that very well, but like I only know my experiences, and I don't know enough about like human learning. And this is something I'm constantly wrestling with, because in the constant pursuit of perfection and getting this right, of can we teach anybody how to be a good service technician or a good boiler operator? Like that question is something I wrestle with. As long as somebody has like, the average natural ability of like just existing as a human. Obviously, if somebody has a mental impairment or can't read or something, like it's going to be much harder to teach them how to do a technical task. But to say that we can't teach everybody with enough time, so time and money are unlimited here. I'm just theorizing. And this, if you're still listening to this, I appreciate you. And this is something I just really wrestle with. And, if you're listening to this and you have an idea or you want to talk about it on the phone with this, please reach out, DM me on LinkedIn or email me, eric.johnson@boilearn.com. I would really like to hear your take on it. But if we can teach anybody how to fix boilers or HVAC, and just zoom it out a little bit, if we can teach anybody or most people, I would say most people, if we can teach most people how to do something, that I would say that is true. Like, what makes a good boiler service technician? And, I've heard companies, I have my theories, but a lot of people say that they have a figure it out attitude. Okay. So a figure it out attitude, is that something we can teach, or is that something that they're born with? And I also do want to credit, I believe a lot of people's lives and their trajectory of their life and their education, their capabilities. One, it's self-limiting. I think people vastly underestimate their ability of what they can do when they put their mind to something. And a lot of people, and I've seen this, and I try to hound on this in classes, but I've seen people go, "Oh, I'm not technical. I can only learn hands-on. I'm just a mechanic. I just turn wrenches." That is a self-limiting belief. But if we go back to raising kids, are how kids raised, it obviously will impact how they are as an adult. And I was raised, I had a toolbox in my room pretty early. It had some tools, and I would get tools for my birthday and Christmas. And I was around tools and could start working on my bike. And I had friends that's not normal. Their parents didn't have any tools. They didn't do any stuff. They would come over and bring their bikes, and we would, repair their chain with the tools I had. But is that simple process of setting that foundation and having tools and thinking and reasoning about how the world works and just observing, doing that as a kid, are you making neuron connections in your brain that then mold you to have the innate ability to figure stuff out differently than kids that don't have that with similar education, schooling education, and then you end up, both being 25 or 30 years old, is the person that learned that. And I wouldn't say it's, well, they have to have tools, they have to do this, but I would say tools, if you work with tools or use tools, you are inherently curious about how something works. You're either taking it apart or putting it together again. And you have to problem solve, even in the smallest ability, but you have to problem solve and reason. And so problem solving and reasoning are two core fundamentals of being able to solve problems. Obviously, problem solving and reasoning, but solve problems in a mechanical room. If you don't have the ability to reason and to think about the big W word, the why is this happening? Why is the burner shutting off? Why are boilers hot? Why is steam hot? Why is it hot in the room? Oh, well, corporate's just too cheap to put air conditioning in. But is that reasoning model, can that be taught? And, this is what I'm struggling with. I think most people can be taught anything. It's just not worth it because we don't have infinite time and money. You want to select people that can get you there the fastest. However, I think companies do this poorly because they don't have the proper systems in place and structure. And in the very complicated world we're in, people forget, the last 20 to 30 years, the world has changed dramatically, for better or for worse. But before even 15 years ago, let's say 20, before 15 to 20 years, you really couldn't sit at home and ruin your life. Now, you can get home, you can get paid on Friday, you can get home, you can order food and have it delivered to your house. So now you're paying extra for food. You can shop online and order all this stuff. You can go to sports gambling websites and gamble, and you can spend your entire paycheck without even realizing it, really, all while sitting on your couch, consuming content on your TV, consuming content on your phone. That has never really been possible within the last 15 to 20 years before that. The ability to spend money without even thinking, frictionless spending of money, and money is just a resource. But if you were to go back to the 90s, now I understand you could call in and give them your credit card number, but on a TV show for QVC and all that stuff, there was that, but there's still a lot of friction to that. But if you wanted something, you had to get out, go in your car, drive to the store, have cash, pay for something. And now we've introduced credit cards. Now you can spend money on your phone. Everything's a subscription, but it's going to employment. We have totally changed how corporations really think about employees and how they treat employees really in the last 30 years. A lot of that's changed a ton. Money has never been worth less. People have 50% buying power than they did 30 years ago. So there's all these outside forces, and education system statistically is preparing people less and less and less for the real world. We also are advancing in the world. So you only have a fixed amount of time from age 5 to age 18 to learn stuff. And if the education system teaches the same thing over and over and over again, and I like to relate this to history, like you have a fixed time to learn history, yet every decade we're making more history. Every year we're making more history. My history classes, I don't think I learned maybe up to the 90s, but we just ran out of time. So now you have the 2000s, 2010s, and even 2020 at this point. But kids theoretically still need to learn everything before that. But, you're just running out of time. You're running out of classroom time. So you either need to cut and change. And is the education system evolving for the world? And it's easy to say, well, of course not. But, why? I don't think the public education system is like there's some massive conspiracy that, it's just built to create factory workers. There's tons of forces on it. But the whole point of wrapping this up is it's never been easier to spend money. Money has never been worth less. The education system for children is failing them more and more and more than ever. And on average, Americans really have no problems, and we've gotten very far away. Most of society has gotten very far away from what actually makes the world go round. It used to be very normal that a whole town works at a mill, and everybody has community, and everybody understands, if the mill ain't running, nobody's eating. Now there's people that like the magic of clean water and plumbing and indoor plumbing. Americans open a tap and they expect clean water to come out. They don't even think about it. That is not a normal thing to happen if we were to look at history or even the rest of the world. So I don't know what percentage of it, but not a large percent of the world has indoor plumbing. And only maybe 50s, maybe 60s, 1960s, 1950s, really did indoor plumbing really get popular and pushed out into rural areas. But within the last 100 years, indoor plumbing has been standardized and, let's say, perfected. Like that is very recent for human history. But now we almost expect it to work. People expect electricity to come on. Yet the average person has no idea how electricity is made. And they just read about power plants shutting down. And yet their electricity still stays on. So they don't think, they're like, oh, well, the power plant, good thing we got rid of all that pollution. Well, they don't see all the people in the background transferring loads and, doing all this load calculation to make sure that we don't have brownouts or power outages in areas. But putting this all back together, like we are in a very unique time in history where I think a lot of employers, and it's easy to dismiss younger generation, but, from what I've read, that's been happening for every single generation. But younger people have never had it harder right now, but it's also never been easier to learn. Information is everywhere. But if we go back to the initial premise, can you teach common sense? And I don't know on that one. I would like to say yes, but I would also say the farther somebody is in life, their brain development maybe has changed, that it's very, very difficult to teach common sense. So if we are taking shop classes out of high schools, if we are insulating kids from jobs so that nobody can get a job before they're 18 because safety, and we can't have kids walk on job sites, or we insulate them from the world and they get to 18 to 20, or even, they go through college. So they get to say 22. If they are at 22 and they've been insulated from how the world works and they've never really had to reason and problem solve, then no wonder employers are finding it so hard to teach them really how to reason and problem solve. because I would like to say the public education system does that, but it's really, and there's all kinds of failures at all levels of that, but they don't do it well. But you also can't rely entirely on the public education system to do that. Like, and people say like, oh, like kids just need to play outdoors. And I would agree with that. But kids, they need to have, I was reading something the other day, kids need to have the ability to be bored and to think. And a lot of people think this doom scrolling concept where you just sit on your phone, you just scroll through TikToks or Instagram reels, and you just constantly just dopamine hits of just something new, something new, something new, something new. And is that taking away our ability to reason and problem solve? And I would say it doesn't help. I don't know if it takes it away, but it doesn't help. And I'm really like trying to wrestle with this. And this is a problem that I can't solve by myself, but really as I've gone down this journey of teaching humans a skill or a trade, in this sense, boilers, it's typically seen as a very hard task. They got to spend decades at it and all this stuff. One, I don't think it takes decades to learn boilers, and I'm an example of that. But two, like I think employers in the current system is just so removed from reality of what kids are set up with. And it's not the kids' fault, or it's not young people's fault, or it's not middle-aged people's fault who are looking to get into the trades. And I try to equate this to sports. If a football team says, oh, we only draft first-round draft picks because we don't have the systems and ability to develop anybody else, they wouldn't have enough people to even just play on their team because you only get one, maybe two first-round draft picks every year. So when employers go, we need somebody with 5 years experience, they need to be able to problem solve, they need to be able to reason by themselves, they need to be able to self-manage, they need to be self-motivated, they need to have great communication skills, they need to be hardworking, they need to want to travel, they need to want to stay late, they need to want to show up early. Like, we are asking basically for Superman with some of these job postings that I've seen for service technicians. The list of wants is almost ridiculous. And I'm like, yeah, that would be nice. I too would love to hire Superman. But if you don't have the ability to teach people those wants that you want from them, and you are just expecting them to come in with all this education and with all this experience and communication skills, sales skills, customer service skills, and want to do all this stuff and then work in a hot, dirty boiler room for $32 an hour and work 70 hours a week and do on-call and work weekends, like that math formula doesn't work for me. And a lot of people will do it just because they need to do it. But being an employer and expecting that is very difficult on my end to like swallow on like why are we expecting that to happen and then surprised when it doesn't happen? Of course it's not going to happen. And that's really like, going back to the whole like, what is the purpose of boiler? And it is the mission statement to drive continuous learning and improvement in the boiler industry. And it's continuous learning and improvement. It is not to drive perfection. It is not to teach people. Continuous learning and improvement. If you want to learn, if you want to improve, I can help you. Other companies can help you. But you also have to meet the people where they're at. If everybody says we need 5 years experience, where do people get 5 years experience? That's chicken and egg scenario. Well, then there's other companies that say, well, we just hire for character and we'll teach the talent or we'll teach the skills. And that is great in theory, but I've seen a lot of companies that don't have more than a week of structured onboarding when they say they hire for character and they'll teach the skills, and they expect the skills to come from on-the-job training, which I won't even get into on-the-job training for this. But if you were to hire for character, let's say, coming back to the original premise, is that character? How do we hire and measure somebody? How much common sense do you have? I don't know. If you have the answer, reach out to me. I would love to talk to you. But how do we hire for common sense? How do we determine as an employer somebody with no skills? They've never heard of a boiler. They just work on their four-wheeler on the weekend. How do we determine what quality traits a human should have to make them most likely to succeed in the skilled trades? And I think that's really the answer. And once again, people say, well, they'll list out all the qualities. Okay. But going back, can you teach qualities? So if you can teach a quality, okay, so then what are the more core qualities that somebody needs to have? Because I'm going to say that the people that have all the core qualities that makes a good skilled tradesperson, they're also probably going to be successful anywhere else in life. It just makes them a good employee and a good human being. So we have to dig deeper than that, or I want to dig deeper than that and say, okay, how do we measure, somebody, and everybody says, don't go to college, the trades, you're going to earn $100,000, all this nonsense. But if you have a high school graduate who's 18, whose parents are not in the trades, and who is like, I don't want to go to college, I want to learn a trade, how do we evaluate them and say, you have what it takes versus you don't have what it takes? And I would say it's impossible, but also it's really, do they have the open-mindedness to learn? And if they can get past the self-limiting belief, you can teach anything really. But then it goes back to, can we teach common sense and reasoning and problem solving? And if they don't have the ability to reason and problem solve at 18, will they have it at 30? I don't know. But this is what I've been thinking about. This is something like I would love, I'm on a quest for knowledge and to figure things out. I believe there's an answer for everything, but also humans are very complicated. Consciousness is not really a thing that we can explain. And what makes humans special is that everybody is different, but a lot of human behavior can be explained through large data sets, and people are more like each other than we think. So if everybody, and the last point on this before I wrap this up is there are personality tests, and I've taken a personality test that was like corporate based, and it was like somebody had watched my entire life and they wrote it down about my tendencies of this summary on this personality test of how I interact with people, leadership qualities, problem solving, and like ideas, how I manage ideas. So if we can, and when I was reading these results, it was like very, very true. It was spot on. So if we can do that with a test, there has to be a test or the ability to test somebody that has the core characteristics that makes them most likely to have the ability to succeed in the skilled trades. If you know of something like that, I would love to hear it. If you have something like that or any thoughts, please, any interaction from the audience of what I'm saying, any feedback would be great. Once again, DM me on LinkedIn or email me, eric.johnson@boiler.com. It's something I'm continuously wrestling with. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and overall, in the big term of things, I don't think there is one answer. That's what makes humans special. Everything's a dynamic. If everything was binary, black and white, corporations would have it figured out by now. And I think a lot of corporations think AI is going to just make humans obsolete, and we can just put everything into binary. Knowledge is binary, and if we just teach the AI everything we know, we don't need humans anymore to do jobs. And I don't know, it's a whole nother topic, but yes, I appreciate if you listen to this, and if you got any value out of this, just let me know. I appreciate any feedback. I also appreciate the couple of people that have rated this podcast 5 stars on your podcast, either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Leave a comment too. I didn't know you could do that, but somebody left a comment on how much they love the podcast a couple months ago, and I appreciated that. I will have some more podcasts for you soon this week. If you want to be a guest as well, or know somebody, want to nominate a guest, please reach out to those channels, LinkedIn or email. Yeah, this is all I have. This is just me thinking out loud and wrestling with what I'm thinking about. I would love to have a conversation with you on the phone. I love talking to people who I've never talked to before and have a different perspective and are dealing with the same things I'm thinking about or have experience in that. I just am on a continuous quest to really get to the bottom of what makes good training, what characteristics of a human makes them most likely to succeed, and how long does it really take for somebody to get proficient and become billable and solve problems in the boiler room. And I know for a fact that it's not as long as most people think. But that is for another podcast. We just need to think about the world a little bit different way going forward than we have in the last 50 years. Once again, thank you for listening. Please rate the podcast 5 stars. More episodes soon. Stay wild.